Welcome to the studio. Today, a simple video, just mixing someone else's song. Let me play you the rough mix and what I achieved to do within 20 minutes. So if you want to know how this is done, just stay tuned.
Away from me. Now it's all just a memory.
Hey guys, welcome to the studio. Welcome to the harbor. It's a beautiful day, a little windy, and the guys over here are working again. Today's very busy for me. I have to take care of a lot of things, especially mixing a song before leaving on vacation. So for me, it's time to just be here in the studio for the next 4 or 5 hours, sit right here and mix. And then we'll do another edition of track submits. It's been a while. So welcome to Track Submits, the little segment within my daily DJ producer vlog where I get submissions by you, listen to them, give you feedback, and as you know, we changed it a little. It's now more detailed and precise, and I'm even mixing songs by other people if they send me the individual stems of their track. Today we only got one submission actually where someone submitted every individual part of their song. So it's an easy choice. This one is by Demise Studio. I don't know if we already had him once, but I mean, it's the only one I got. So if you want to be part of the next episode, either send in all of your individual stems or a Logic project file would also actually work. He's been producing just for a year and his song is called Vibrant. So let's have a quick listen into his rough mix, then drag all of the stems into Logic and start mixing. It's not perfectly mixed, of course. How could it be perfect with someone that has just started like a year ago? But he has a good understanding of like a song structure, kind of. There are not too many elements in there. That's usually like the #1 beginner mistake. They make their music with way too many tracks. They try to layer and stack to mask things and make them sound nice. But this makes actually everything way more horrible. So I think we can actually take it to the next level. Okay, everything in Logic. He already named everything, so that's really nice. We got kick, clap, percussions, bass, then a snap, a bass line. I color coded them. Bass is always red for me. Everything above the bass is drums. At the very top, usually the kick. And then we got in yellow all of the chords, a piano chord, a plucked chord layer on top, and another pluck. Let me play you that really quick. The piano's playing the chords every bar, and the other 2 layers do a rhythm that is actually really nice. Very standard housey, tropical housey kind of style for this kind of track. And then we actually got here a group. We won't need the group as well. This one can also go. And the blue ones are just effects. And I will basically concentrate on mixing the drop. I will try to do it in 20 minutes. Let's see if I can actually achieve that. I will cut out parts if someone calls me or I have to go somewhere and do something else. But I think this should be easily done in 20 minutes. So let's just get started by muting everything and just listening, for example, first to the kick. If the kick is actually the right one and actually has the right frequency. So let's open up Span, our favorite analyzer. So the kick should actually work. Let's try it. I usually change the kick, but this one could work. Let's get to the next element, the clap. That sounds already really solid. So if you compare it, let's maybe again listen to the rough mix of the artist to listen for like what could be improved. It's very bass heavy, at the same time very top heavy, and the reverbs are a little too much and it sounds really squashed, so that the reverb is like really sticking out. It's like too much compression and limiting on the master, I think. So let's listen again to the same parts without the processing, just like the dry bits he sent me. That already sounds a lot better, so I think there's a lot of exaggerated stuff on his master. But again, let's do kick, clap. Of course, first up we need reverb. So I got here my bus number 5 with my Valhalla vintage verb that has like a pretty good starting point setting for claps. Let's turn it up. And since the clap here doesn't always hit on 2 and 4, I will actually give it a little more decay to make the reverb longer. But less in the mix again. And that's something really important for me. I do that on every single track that I mix and that I produce, that the reverb kind of stops with the next kick to have like this sucking groovy kind of thing going on, especially if you then put like limiting and compression on top of the master, get the reverb out. This will be really nice. Safety, low cut EQ, of course. I'm doing this low cut on basically every element just to get rid of any muddy low end frequencies. I won't mention that anymore because then it really gets boring because I'm doing that everywhere. Maybe just on the bass I will show it in detail because there it's like a little different. But on everything, just cut the low frequencies to the point where you start hearing that the element actually is losing low end and then back off a little. It's just a safety low cut. EQing for the clap, not really necessary, maybe boosting a tiny bit the top end. But it's a very solid sample. The percussions, I'm not sure about them. They sound a little bit hectic. So let's maybe lower them in volume first. I don't know if it's a loop or if this is like a group out of the initial production because there are like other elements introduced later on. But here I'm actually cutting the very top end because it's a little distracting. We don't need those frequencies. And then also here reverb just to glue it in. For this loop I'm using another reverb, bus number 4. It's also the Valhalla vintage verb with a way shorter decay time. It's more like just an ambient, as you can see, small drum room. It's like the initial preset. I will also cut away the low frequencies, maybe up to 400 Hertz. You should be just able to hear it once you bypass it. So with the reverb, it's really just a tiny bit to make all of the drums sound more together, coming out of the same kind of room reverb. Next up is the sub bass. I like that he actually has 2 basses. One of them is the sub part and the other one the top part. Not a huge fan of the sound of the top part. It sounds a little too thin. And And the sub is a little too loud. Let's lower it maybe a bit. And here, even on the sub bass, we will cut away the very, very, very low frequencies. I usually cut at least at 50 Hertz to make room for the kick. Because as you can see now on the analyzer, there's the bass playing its notes. And then if you introduce the kick, it should sit below it. So this doesn't interfere. You can still see all three peaks, like the bass notes and the kick. Let's test it with the top bass. Yeah, it's a little loud. And also the top bass, of course, needs a cut. I'm actually even cutting into the top bass layer because we still got the sub bass layer underneath. So I don't want both of them to overlap. Like one of them stops at a certain frequency, the other one should like kind of start so that they sound like one. Let's put sidechaining on both of them to actually make even more room whenever the kick hits. I'm using the LFO tool, just drawing the sidechaining in there. Sometimes starts clicking. I think preset 3, yes, it has this like attack curve on it. And then really quick to the mixer, if you hold down Option, you can just copy plugins. And now you can hear the ducking. It's way too much, of course. So let's back it off again a little, at least on the top bass. I wish the top bass would have like more character and actually be a little lower and darker and longer, but that's something we unfortunately can't change. So let's listen to it with the other drums. Yeah, also the sidechaining on the low bass is too much. Let's take care of the snap that is in the song. This one right here. Also a good sample, typical for tropical house. There is not much I have to do with it, except for giving it the same reverb as the clap. I don't know if I'm a big fan that both of them play at the same time, because when they both play together, you can't actually hear that the snap is a snap. And I think the clap without the snap sounds way better. It adds like harshness to it that we actually don't need. So maybe later on I will decide to mute one of the two depending on the rest of the elements. I think since the bass is so up high, the top bass, it actually also needs a reverb to give it a room. Maybe this instrument reverb, also here, Valhalla Vintage Verb, 2 seconds of decay time. And also here, very important, the low cut at around 400 Hertz. Usually you don't need reverb on a bass, especially not on a sub bass. This will just be really muddy. But this one is high up and it's like a classic house kind of sound and vibe to have a bit of reverb on this top bass. And I think it really makes everything glue together a lot better. Way more exciting. Now let's get actually to the chords, the grand piano. Again, good selection of sounds and samples. I will actually cut away a little bit of the top end because we already have those other two piano and plug layers on top that cover the top end, and a deeper piano sounds more club. Also here, reverb again, quite a lot. Because I'm missing the sustain a little. I don't know if you use the sustain pedal or not, but by adding reverb, you can kind of fake it being longer and make it sound more realistic. Next layer is the plug sound. Actually cutting it quite a lot to make sure it doesn't interfere with the bass. Also here, reverb. As you might be able to notice, so far we didn't have to use any kind of compression because all of the drum samples are already compressed, because they were sampled from songs that were already compressed. And also like the piano and the synths out of the computer, there's not a whole lot of change in the dynamic. If you had vocals or something like that, we would definitely have to compress. But so far I think we can get away without actually using it. Maybe just on the master a tiny bit, but that's something for later. Also here, a medium reverb, and for the top layer, that's really smart to have like a layer that gives you the sustain and another one with the attack. So you can just, whenever attack is missing and the chords don't cut through, you can just increase the volume of the plug one that has the attack. Really love that idea. And the sound by itself isn't really nice, but it goes well together with the other two. Let's also add here reverb, the safety low cut. I personally think at this part of the song, the grand piano, we don't need that. It's slowing down the track because it hits the chords only every 4 bars. So I think muting it might be actually the right call. Maybe let's not change the choices by the artist too much. Maybe let's just lower it in volume and give those two rhythmic plugged chord sounds a little bit more volume. Let's compare it again to the original to not get lost, because sometimes when there are layers, depending on how you mix the layers, the sound changes a lot, and that's not what we want to do. We just want to mix it. I think quite a huge difference actually. Okay, next up, the flute sound, which is actually like the main part of the song. Flutes are hard to handle because they usually have resonating frequencies in them, so let's see. Yeah. One reason why I'm not using flutes, I just can't stand the resonating ringing in my ear. But there's actually a small plugin that can help you really fast. It's by Oak Sound and it's called Soothe. And it detects for you resonating frequencies. And then just by turning up the depth, it gets rid of them for you. So that's like very easy. But you have to use it like only a bit, because the resonating part of the sound makes the sound. So if you cut all of them away, it sounds different. So just a tiny bit right here. Also reverb. Reverb as well, of course. We always need reverb. And now it's really hard to try and get this one into the mix without making it too loud to cut through, but then it sits above the mix and not too quiet because it's actually like the main thing of the song. Let's see. I will actually cut away the piano, the grand piano, at least out of this kind of section of the drop. The effects, I will just check the volume of them, add an EQ, just get rid of the low frequencies. Effect sounds usually don't need those frequencies, except for like kick, impact sounds and this kind of stuff. Let's add reverb to all of them. Usually like to use the same one. Now that the piano is gone, I can actually give those other two chord layers more bass again, because there's like a little gap I can hear between the bass and the next kind of elements. It makes it sound a little hollow, so let's back off again on the low cut on both of them. And I think we can add a little more kick. And actually bass, like the low end can actually be a bit louder. So let's compare it again to the original rough mix. Yeah, in the original, everything is really drowning in reverb. So the flute, for example, you can't even really hear because it has so much reverb. So let's maybe add a little reverb to get closer to the rough mix. I think, again, as always, I will change the kick, at least give it a try. So let's open up my Geist program to add kicks. So far I'm happy with everything, except for the two basses. They sound a little hollow. I would love to replace them, but that's again not my task. It's already enough that I'm replacing the kick. But if I mute both basses and listen to it, it sounds actually really cool and clean. And then with the basses. And that percussion loop is very hectic. If you listen to it without it, so maybe that's just lowered in volume a little. That's a compromise. It's also very stereo, which is actually nice, but it's a little harsh. And the groove isn't like 100%. Now all of it goes through my SSL compressor, just a tiny bit of compression, 2 dB of gain reduction. A limiter on top with a threshold of -7.8 just to get it up to loudness. The track is now pretty roughly kind of mixed. I think we got it to a point where it's definitely better and it sounds normal. The original really is drowning a lot in reverb, like very, 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 very much reverb, and then a lot of compression and limiting on the master, which just increases the reverb even more. So let's listen again to the original rough mix by the artist and then the 20-minute mixed version. There's some things I would love to point out. For example, if you now just start muting certain elements and you hear that the mix is actually improving, then you know those parts are the ones you should consider replacing. So if this would have been my track, I would now start like listening for those things and start replacing them. So for example, the drum, hi-hat, percussion loop, I don't know, it just doesn't feel really right. So if you listen again to it and mute it, you immediately hear that it sounds better. So I think it could also work really well without it. It's like one element too much maybe at this section of the song. Maybe just introduce it after 8 bars, so you have another element that is interesting in the arrangement that enters the song and makes it a little more empty on the drop, which makes it easier to mix, and it also hits harder, of course. And then clap and snap, again, I think they don't go well together. So if you mute the clap, it sounds nice and like tropical. Or you just pick the clap. But here in this case, because it's so typical, I would get rid of the clap, just leave the snap, give the snap a little more reverb, make it a little bit louder, and I think this should improve it. I think this works really well. Just getting rid of 1, 2, 3 elements to have more room, and then just precisely getting the volumes right, because that's basically all we did. Safety low cuts, getting the volumes right, thinking about the elements, which is actually a step that you have to do before even mixing. But while mixing, sometimes you feel like it's too much. So reducing it makes it easier, makes it sound cleaner. So let's, for the last time, compare the pre-mixed rough mix by the artist to, yeah. Now, I don't want to call it a final mix. It's like barely there. Usually mixing takes 6, 7 hours, and you could start now doing fancy stuff like adding compression, vintage compression, giving it a color, or using like saturation and these kind of things. But I think like just getting the levels right and thinking about the elements and reverb is enough to get any kind of mix to a point where it's like, okay. Maybe a little tiny bit heavy on the kick, but for dance music, That's usually what you need. And if you send this now to mastering, it will be all glued together a little more, make it 5% better. But yeah, I think that's it for today. I hope you learned something. Take it easy. Mixing isn't that complicated. The most important is which kind of elements you have, and that those elements are good, and that you use a few elements playing at the same time. This makes mixing so much easier. Just listen to any other song you love, or that is up in the charts, or is being played by the superstar DJs. They're usually fairly minimal, because that's just what makes it sound good. If there's a lot of stuff in it, it's impossible to mix. There's a physical limit to having a certain amount of elements with a certain kind of frequencies within the mix. So think twice if you add another element. It's more important to have those elements spread throughout the song, throughout the arrangement, to keep it interesting. But all at once, it's usually too much. So yeah, that's it for today. If you want to submit your track, down below the first link. Tomorrow back again here in the studio working on another song and sharing, of course, my working process with you. That's it. Sign out.
Lovers pretending that we needed others. I felt as you're walking away from me. Now it's all just a memory.